I'm Steve Reeder, and I'm interviewing Global War on Terror veteran Matt Monahan on behalf of Monrovia High School and the Monrovia Alumni Association. It is December 20th, 2019, and we are filming at Monrovia High School Broadcasting Center. Okay, Matt, first off, thank you for participating in the interview today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Go ahead and give me your full name and where you were born.
I'm Matthew Philip Monahan. I was born in Potsdam, New York, moved to Monrovia and graduated here at Monrovia High School.
What are your parents' name and what are their occupations?
My mother is Stephanie Zaire. She's a psychologist for the state of New York. And my father, Jody Monahan, was a teacher for 10 years. And now he's an underwriter at Anthem Wellpoint Insurance.
Do you have any siblings? And if you do, what are their names?
I have a younger sister, Catherine Monahan. She's attending college at Clarkson University in upstate New York. And my brother, Joey Baxter, is going to do his physician's assistant master's degree right now at University of Binghamton, New York.
Where did you attend your primary and secondary schools?
So I went to elementary and middle school at Colton Pierpont Central in New York, and then moved here and went to high school here at Monrovia.
What year did you move to Monrovia?
2012.
Did you participate in any sports here at Monrovia?
I played football, I wrestled, and I ran track.
Did you have any jobs during high school or before the service?
I worked at Fight Plumbing all through high school, mostly in the summers, but I just worked as an assistant plumber and a basic laborer.
What year did you enlist in the military?
I enlisted in the military right after high school in July 2016.
And which branch of the military did you enlist in?
I joined the Army.
Why was your decision to join the Army for?
I think the Army gives you the most career freedom. I think they allow you to do, for the most part, what you want to do with your career versus some of the other branches try and force you a general direction. And that was appealing to me with the Army, is getting to piece my own career together versus having to follow what somebody else wants me to do.
Did you have any family that had been in the military?
My dad was in the Air Force. He was a PJ and then attended the United States Air Force Academy. And my stepdad was security forces in the Air Force for 20 years.
Did they have any influence on you deciding to join the military?
I don't know if they directly did. It might have been kind of subliminal as I was growing up. My dad said he wasn't surprised when I joined the military at all. They never coerced me to join or discouraged me from joining at all, but I think maybe subliminally it was kind of, they were both role models in my life that I looked up to. It affected me joining eventually. Where
did you do basic training at?
I did basic at Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
When did you go to training?
I left, I don't remember the exact week, but it was the end of July 2016, and was there from whenever I left until October 2016.
So how many weeks was basic training for you?
12 weeks.
12 weeks. What did you think about where you were located? What was Fort Jackson like?
Fort Jackson is miserably hot in the summer. It is unbelievable. Like, Indiana gets pretty warm. Growing up here, I've been around warm weather. Fort Jackson's unbelievably hot. We're doing a lot of physically strenuous stuff that, I played sports in high school, but some of the stuff was pretty new. Using muscles in my body, doing things that were new to me in the heat made it 10 times worse. It was exhausting in a very high stress environment to begin with. It was just a lot of new things all at once, which I'm sure is what they're going for, but it was kind of a sensory overload when I first got there.
What was your typical day in basic training? Like, what time did you get up? And
if I remember, we woke up around 4:30, 5 a.m. We do our morning physical training, which the Army does the APT or the APFT program now, or they have very precise stretches and programs you do, and then they generally alternate. You do a strength and endurance day or a run day, and then shower real quick. You get 2-3 minutes, the stereotype what you hear about while getting yelled at. Go to breakfast, and then just depending on what part of the cycle you're in, you do your training throughout the day, whether that's your rifle training, first aid, just general soldiering skills throughout the day. Lunch, continue that throughout the afternoon, dinner, then just your free time weapons cleaning, get ready for bed, and the next day.
What did you do after basic training? Like, where were you deployed? What schools did you go to?
So immediately after basic, I went to Fort Lee, Virginia to attend phase 1 of explosive ordnance disposal school. Graduated from there. I went to Eglin Air Force Base, Florida to attend Phase 2 and the rest of EOD school. That did not work out, and I was reclassed as a combat medic, 68 Whiskey. So I moved to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and I was there for 16 weeks as being trained to be a combat medic. While I was there, I was given the opportunity to go to airborne school. And so I graduated AIT for 68 Whiskey Combat Medic, went to Fort Benning, Georgia for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, attended airborne school en route to my unit, and then ended up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
What was EOD school like?
It's very mentally challenging. You can't study for the school very much because a lot of the materials are classified. You can't bring them home at the end of the day. So you have to really be on your stuff at school, use the time allotted to you to the best of your advantage. It's a lot of memorization. Just you have to change your general way of thinking to how the school kind of wants you to look at things. It's very outside the box, being able to solve problems critically versus, A plus B equals C.
Now, you wanted to be EOD originally, correct?
Yes, I did. And I love being a medic. I got very lucky when the Army told me I was going to be a medic, but that was not what I originally intended on doing.
What was medic school like?
Medic school is very daunting at first because medics in the Army have a lot of responsibility. Sometimes we're the only trained medical personnel with a group of 50 plus guys, depending on what your deployment's like. So it's a lot of responsibility, and you know that. And at first, you know that you're going to have all this responsibility, but you don't have any of the medical training, so you don't know how you're ever going to get there and be able to handle that responsibility. It's overwhelming. It's kind of daunting at first, but the instructors at Fort Sam Houston are awesome. They really train you up to the best you can be, so that by the time you get to your first unit, you can start being a functioning member of your platoon, company, battalion, so on and so forth, as a decent combat medic.
How long was the train at Sam Houston?
It was roughly 16 weeks. If you have your EMT certification or your paramedic certification, which I did not, but if you do, you get to skip the first part of training there and kind of get fast-tracked through. But I didn't have that, so I was there for 16 weeks.
What was Fort Sam Houston like compared to Fort Jackson?
It was still very hot, and we had a little bit more freedom. So occasionally on weekends, I would get to go explore San Antonio, Texas, which is a beautiful city. The food was a little bit better. We didn't have drill sergeants. We had AIT platoon sergeants, so they were still strict and still discipline into us, but it wasn't the on your back, in your face kind of stereotypical drill sergeant thing all the time. So it was a little bit nicer. I had a little bit more free time, but it was still very stressful. Tough academic and physically challenging school.
So in a traditional infantry platoon, how many men are there?
Roughly in a platoon, probably 15 to 20, just depending on
how many medics?
One.
So you're the guy.
Yeah.
What was airborne training like?
Airborne training it's a lot of fun. It's funny, honestly. The black hats, the airborne instructors, have this choreographed performance they do for everything they teach you. It's very strict, fluid motions that they do. Every single one of them does the exact same way, and it's funny. It's funny to watch the first time you do it. I laughed hysterically the first time I do it because it looks like they're a puppet being controlled by somebody teaching you how to do these points of performance in an aircraft, getting ready to jump out with a parachute. You kind of get used to it, and then the novelty of that kind of goes away, and you realize, okay, now I have to learn how to jump out of a plane and not get hurt. So it was a lot of fun at airborne school. It moves really quick. It's 3 weeks to teach you how to jump out of a plane. There's ground week, tower week, jump week, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of nerves, but I enjoyed it a lot.
How many jumps did you do in jump week?
5. So you have to complete 5 jumps at airborne school before you leave. Normally, there's Hollywood jumps, which it's just you and the parachute, no equipment. There's combat equipment jumps where you'll have a rucksack rigged in between your legs. And then there's a nighttime jump. So it doesn't always work out, but generally at airborne school, you'll do 3 Hollywood jumps, 1 combat equipment jump, and 1 nighttime jump, which that's what I did. Those were my 5 jumps at airborne school.
How many jumps have you done in total, do you think?
27. I closed my jump log for deployment last year with 27 jumps, including the 5 from airborne school.
Have you ever had a bad jump?
I've had a few very bad jumps. I had one jump where the safety misread the wind and thought it was a safe jump or safe wind for us to jump. It was not at all. I was the last jumper out the bird, and we sent 16 people to the ER after this jump. And my chaplain, my unit's chaplain, had an open femur fracture, and his femur was sticking out of his leg by the time I got to the ground. It was actually a really bad day. It was really busy. There's other medics on the drop zone pulling medical coverage, but we were busy, sent 16 people to the ER. That was probably my worst jump.
Is it the majority of your training that you've had, or are those schools?
Yes, it's airborne school, and then I've gone to a couple different specified medical classes. I've taken a couple classes on cardiac medicine, stuff like that, and then I just recently went to the expert field medic badge. That was 2 weeks at Fort Bragg. It's not a school in terms of teaching you stuff, more of an assessment. You get a badge to wear. It was 1 week of standardization where they show you the 3 lanes you'll be doing, how exactly they want you to perform them, and then starting test week, you take a PT test, you take a written test where you have to score 60 out of 80 correctly, and then you do your 3 lanes where you're doing communication, evacuation, warrior tasks, medical tasks, and you have to pass so many of each of those. If you make it through the lanes and the written tests and the PT test, you do a 12-mile ruck march, and you get your expert field medic badge. I just did that in October. I was one of 34 out of 186 to graduate.
So we had talked earlier, the pass rate for that's quite low, so that's quite an achievement.
It was really tough. I didn't have the highest hopes going into there. I'd never gone before. A lot of people get their badge on their 2nd, 3rd, 4th try. I've talked to people that have been to this program 6 times and still don't have the badge, so it was my first time going. I honestly didn't really expect to get the badge, but went there, gave it my best shot, and it worked out for me.
So you've also been deployed. So when were you deployed and where?
So I deployed to Afghanistan, TAC East and TAC Southeast. I deployed October 2018. I got home August 2019.
So about 9 months?
Yep.
So what did you do while you were deployed?
So we only deployed a single company to support other people, but I was route clearance. So I flew into Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan, and then I wasn't even there for 24 hours. I got shipped out with the rest of my platoon to Jalalabad Airfield. We did route clearance, just driving big trucks, searching for IEDs. I was the only medic for my platoon there, so I'd sit in the back of the truck, hope nothing bad happens. And then we also got, while we were there for a little bit, we got used as security elements a lot for advisory missions, high-ranking officers and politicians to fly into different Afghan compounds and talk to their leaders and military advisors and such. They started using us as a security element for those, so I did quite a bit of that too.
What's the weather like in Afghanistan?
It was very hot when we got there still, especially in Jalalabad. And then nobody told me how cold Afghanistan gets in the winter. I was freezing. I moved FOBs, I went to a different place, and I was pretty high up in the mountains, and we had a ton of snow, and it was freezing, and I was not prepared for it at all. Nobody gave me warning that Afghanistan gets that cold.
Explain what a FOB is.
Fort Observer Base, it's around the United States. You have your Fort Bragg, Fort Drum, Fort Campbell, these great big bases. In Afghanistan, you might have Bagram Airfield or Jalalabad Airfield, where they're not quite the size of a stateside base, but they pretty much have all your amenities there, your laundry points, stuff like that. And then there's some smaller FOBs where it's literally just like a gated community. You might have a few hardstand buildings, may or may not have running water. It just depends on where you're at, but they're basically just wherever the military people are living there. And what you have on those FOBs is depending on how many people are there most of the time.
So the size of the FOB will be determined by the objective, where it's at, but the average one, about how many soldiers would be stationed there?
So I know I was the AP Lightning, the FOB I was at for my latter half in Afghanistan was a rather small FOB. And we had about 200 people there. But like I said, that was pretty small. I'd say some of the bigger ones have anywhere from 500 to 1,500 people, I'd say. And then like the airfields, you'll have a lot more at because there's major divisions and elements moving there. So like you might have 2,000 plus people at some of those.
Did you have much contact with the local people in Afghanistan?
So they lived on AP Lightning with us. It was completely integrated. So initially in deployment, I did not have as much. You'd see them around and about. There's the bazaars we could go visit. But it wasn't until I moved FOBs that I was living with the Afghans, like sharing bathrooms with them. They didn't live in the same building as me, but I played volleyball with them, sat at the cafeteria with them. That was a really good cultural experience, a lot of integration. It was stressful at first because it was just new to me and it's kind of a culture shock, but eventually I took a lot of positive experiences from that.
What was your typical day like at the Ford observing base?
So we ran most of our missions at night from, I'd say, sundown, 10 p.m., 9 p.m. to 3, 4 a.m. So start my day at night, do mission prep, go over what we're going to do, running that, make it back before the sun gets up generally, stage the trucks, unload everything, take my kit off, get everything prepared for the next day, go to get breakfast most of the time, and then sleep till lunch. If I was extra tired or not hungry, sleep through lunch, wake up, kind of check in with whoever was in charge of me, like, hey, I'm awake, good for the day. And then I'd go to the gym, play cards with somebody, do something, watch a movie to kind of take up the next portion of your day, go to dinner, start mission prep the next night. Every day, it's pretty strict, followed that schedule. Kept me out of trouble, gave me something to do. I tried to stay busy the best I could to make time go by faster.
So you were essentially running missions every day?
I'd say almost every day. There's every once in a while we might have like a week break where we didn't have a mission, but for the majority of my time over there, it was pretty consistent.
And the missions were basically the entire night?
Yep.
Was it always working with American soldiers, or were you working with other units or any foreign soldiers?
So we worked with the Polish a lot. They ran missions with us, and the Czechs. They had a route clearance package that they attached to us. The Georgian Army had some route clearance a little bit later in deployment. They helped us out. I didn't work with them as much personally, but Czechs, Polish, and then just other United States military forces. Like we worked with some Air Force guys, some Marine guys, which a lot of people in the Army haven't spent any time working with any of the other joint services, so that was good experiences for them too. Work with other branches, get exposure to that, see how other people do things.
So with entertainment, you were lifting weights, watching videos. Did you keep up with people at home?
Now we had Wi-Fi more often than we didn't. It would go out every once in a while, sometimes on missions. Like some of the longer missions, we wouldn't have internet, obviously, but pretty consistent Wi-Fi. I'd use Facebook Messenger to stay in touch. I could call my parents on that. I went weeks without talking to anybody, but more often than not, I had pretty good contact with people at home. The time zone did make it hard because I was 9.5 hours ahead, I believe, if I remember correctly. So while I was on mission was when my parents and brothers and sister were awake during the day, and then when I was up during the day, they were sleeping. So that made it more difficult to talk to anybody than the actual technological capabilities did.
Do you have any unique stories about some of the missions that you would care to share?
So there was one day we had gotten. I don't think we had mission this day. We were playing poker in my buddy's like tent, hard stand, plywood building, and you only drink bottled water out there. They get crates and crates of bottled water shipped in. So mid poker game, I think I folded my hand. I walked out to get a crate of water, and I walk outside and there's machine gun tracer rounds like flying towards our FOB. Thought that was rather questionable, so I'm looking, and then I start to hear like machine guns getting shot off and grenades getting pulled and thrown, and start to get pretty nervous, obviously. And so I run back inside. I was like, hey, does anybody know what's going on? And like, what are you talking about? Like I'm pretty sure our FOB's getting overran. Like there's a lot of stuff going on outside. So my team leader Sergeant Fuller walks outside. He's like, I don't know, man. He's like, just start getting your gear on, get your aid bag, like stand by for directions. I was like, all right. So now I'm freaking out because I'm like, we're about to get like attacked or like complex ambush on this fob, like a Restrepo type situation. And they came over the intercom on the fob and they're like, man your security positions, get the machine guns in the towers. And I was like, this is like really happening. Like our fob's about to get overran. Terrifying at the time. In hindsight, hilarious. It turns out that Afghanistan had beaten Pakistan in a cricket game. And the Afghan compound essentially down the road from our fob was celebrating, and they're just launching off and shooting everything they could get their hands on. No intention of causing any harm to anybody. They were just excited that Afghanistan beat Pakistan in cricket, and that's how they celebrated. And we told them that was a terrible idea in hindsight and that they can't do that again. But it was, now looking back at it, I think that's one of the funniest experiences I had, just because it's such a surreal moment, and I was honestly terrified at the time, but they were just happy that they won a cricket game.
Do you have any more that are on patrol or anything that happened that was interesting or terrifying?
So now we've been in Afghanistan for so long that the Afghanistan civilians have pretty much realized that we'll pay for their vehicles if we cause them to wreck. And we literally throw a piece of paper at them, and generally it gets brought to the closest large base, and they bring that paper and they just get money for it because it's not worth, we've been there so long politically, it's not worth arguing with every person anymore. So we'll be on patrols and people will be trying to hit our trucks with their cars so that they can get it fixed. And that's rather intimidating too, because the car bombs and the vehicle-borne IEDs are a pretty commonplace thing in Afghanistan still. So we tell our gunners to be on watch for, like, the cars aren't supposed to approach our convoys at all whatsoever, but they're trying to hit us so they can get their car paid for. So it causes a very tense scenario where we're shooting warning rounds at stuff and people that generally don't intend to cause any harm to us. They just want to get their car fixed. I saw a lot of that on patrols, and it was funny, but it was kind of always unsettling at the same time as well.
Did you feel like the soldiers that you were serving with had a pretty high camaraderie?
Yes, so a lot of us luckily had been in the unit for a decent amount of time before deployment together, so we'd kind of grown up through the Army ranks together. We were already pretty close, and then deploying together definitely brought us a whole new level of close. I've got a friend from deployment I'll probably talk to the rest of my life. Some of them getting out of the military, staying in. We're all kind of going our separate ways, doing our own thing, but you definitely remember that group of people you're over there with, and there's a bond forced upon you. Even if you didn't like somebody, you're living in a gated community with them for 9 months and you have to see them every day. Like, you can't get away from them even if you wanted to. So it forces a camaraderie on you. Even if you didn't like somebody before deployment, you pretty much learned how to live with them, and you didn't have to love them, but you learned how to spend time with them and still get along with them while you were over there.
So the unit and the people that you were stateside with, you deployed with most of them?
Yep,
and
there's exceptions to that, but as a general rule of thumb, yeah.
How many people in your unit roughly had already been deployed?
Not many. We had a pretty young unit, so most of our senior leadership had deployed. I'd say like squad leaders are like E6s and up. Majority of them had deployed, but as a whole, like our unit, I would say probably 50% of them, this was our first deployment, if not more, maybe more towards like 60-70%. This was our first, but we had plenty of prior deployment experience. There's a lot of young people who had never deployed before.
So you're on 2 forward observation bases. Were you ever at one of the larger airfields?
Yep, for my last couple months on deployment, I got pulled to Bagram Airfield. That's where I spent the rest of the time. Still doing the same thing, running missions, but Bagram's huge. There's like a Subway and a Pizza Hut there. It was a lot different living experience, but I enjoyed it as well.
Did it feel safer being at the larger airfield, or did it have a different type of problem?
I thought it was going to feel safer, but it really didn't, because Bagram's so big that the ISIS-K and Taliban terrorist organizations target Bagram quite a bit. Actually, I just saw on the news like a week ago, their hospital got attacked by a car bomb. That was a week ago today. But the indirect fire, the like mortars and rockets being shot, there's a lot more of that at Bagram than there is anyone else because there's a lot more targets at Bagram. So I was moving there and was thinking, okay, I'm going to get Pizza Hut, be at this cool big base with everything I want and these great buildings. Really, we're just getting rockets shot at us a lot more. So that was, you get used to that kind of quickly too. And they don't ever hit anything they're trying to, but not never, they do, but rarely. So I thought it was going to feel a lot safer. It really didn't for those reasons.
How often would there be a rocket attack?
Depending on the season, some we'd go 3 weeks and it'd be every night, and then you'd go for a month and not have anything. In the winter, it kind of boils down a lot less. They don't have the resources, and then spring they say like fighting season kind of picks back up. So with Ramadan and different holidays, it just depends on what's going on. New Year's, we got rocket attacks. The beginning of Ramadan, the last night of Ramadan. It really depends on like what the events going on are, not. But sometimes every night, sometimes not for a month.
But it's mostly at night.
Yeah, pretty consistently.
And so you were typically on mission when a lot of this was going on.
Yep. And we'd get stuck outside the fob. They'd close the gates, and we'd have to wait for IDF to stop before we can move back in. They aim at the airfield a lot. They try and hit the aircrafts because value-wise, that's a lot of money. Even if nobody's in it, if they blow up an airplane, that's a lot of money that they just cost the United States.
So when did you end your deployment?
I got back the last week of July this year, 2019.
And so when you left Afghanistan, where did you go to?
So we got pulled to Kuwait for like a week and a half, 2 weeks roughly, just to, I don't really know why we go to Kuwait, but you do. That's everybody that leaves Afghanistan goes to Kuwait. You move all your bags there. You live in a building with 200 other people. It's miserable. And Kuwait is actually the hottest place in the world. And then once you get your unit gets their tickets and flights home, you fly from Kuwait to Germany. You're on like a military from Kuwait to Germany, and then you switch over and you're on like a civilian, regular, family vacation jet plane from Germany. We flew to Baltimore, Maryland. Some people will fly to Connecticut. It just depends. But somewhere on the East Coast, and then flew from there to Fort Bragg.
Was it hard going to Kuwait after being in Afghanistan? Like, what was your day like in Kuwait?
Nothing. We had literally nothing to do at Kuwait, and I hated it. It was nice. I got a lot of sleep, but I woke up and had nothing to do all day. There was no agenda for me. It was just wait to go home for 10 days.
And how long were you in Germany?
Less than a night. We just stopped there to switch planes. So just sat in the terminal for like 8 hours.
And after you got back to the United States, where did you go from there? Back to Fort Bragg?
So we landed in Baltimore, and our aircraft carrier stewardesses told us that our pilot had maxed his hours, and they didn't have a pilot in Baltimore to replace him. So our families are at Fort Bragg waiting for us to come home. And they're like, yeah, no, tomorrow morning you have to wait. So they put us in a really nice hotel in Baltimore. Like, got to stay at a really nice like Sheraton hotel, have a room to myself. But my families were waiting for me to come home in North Carolina, and we had to wait till the next day to come home now because they waited. So spent a night in Baltimore and then flew to Fort Bragg the next day.
What was it like getting back to Fort Bragg, seeing your family?
It's very odd because it takes you a long time to adjust to get to being home because you have all these very strict rules on deployment that you follow, these freedoms that you don't have. You don't have to make any choices. I didn't cook for 9 months, and then I get home and you're in the cereal aisle and you're looking at 200 different kinds of cereal. And I didn't have to make this decision for a year of what cereal I want to buy. It's bittersweet, but seeing your family is a surreal moment. It's unbelievably happy your friends. Glad everybody made it home. That did make it home, but then it's bittersweet because you think about not everybody does make it home. That part's rather upsetting, and I thought about that when I was getting home, seeing my family. There's not everybody got to do this, have this moment.
So when you got home, how did you have much time with your family, or were you right back at Fort Bragg?
So they try and give you a lot of decent family time, but unfortunately there's still work that has to be done, paperwork. So get home, I live in the barracks, so they got me a barracks room, got my stuff moved in, and then they gave us a 4-day weekend. So 4 days, go home with your families, do what you need to do, don't get arrested, don't get in trouble, see you later. Come back to work after that 4-day, and it's pretty much half days of doing like improv. You have to in-process Fort Bragg, do a lot of paperwork stuff, get your pay started again regularly the way it's supposed to be. And then once all of your paperwork, administration stuff is kind of done, you will take your post-deployment leave, you'll go home, and then you'll have 2-3 weeks to actually spend with your family.
So how do you think being deployed impacted you?
I think I'd pay a lot more attention to detail now and little things. I appreciate really simple things like being able to drive my car wherever I want on a Friday night. Like we have unbelievable freedoms in America. I could take off and start driving to California tonight if I wanted to, and nobody would stop me. And the freedom and not being restrained here and constrained, I appreciate a lot more after deployment than I ever did before.
You've re-enlisted. Do you maybe plan on making the military a career?
I wouldn't be surprised if I did. I'm not going to say that I'm definitely going to, but taking it 4 years at a time. The military's been great for me. I just re-enlisted for another 4, and then that 4 year, there's no reason for me to get out, sign up again. I could see me doing 20 years, but I'm not going to say it's a guarantee.
So this is hopefully going to be housed in the Library of Congress, and one day your family and friends could see this. So what would you like to tell them?
Thank you for your unconditional support of me through all the hardships and struggles I've done through the military. Friends, family, loved ones have always been there supporting me. I couldn't do anything without you guys. Thank you.
So again, I'm Steve Reeder, and this has been filmed on December 20th, 2019 at Monrovia High School.